we again have this intercomparison slide so you can see, in this case we're all sort of on the east, but the relative size of the institutions compared to the city. I think we have an interesting distribution both in terms of public and private universities, but also the relative size of the school, the university within the city where it resides, which clearly gives us a kind of a spectrum in terms of potential impact. So, I'm Gabe Benoit, and I'm a professor here and the faculty director for the Hixon Center for Urban Ecology. And I'm going to be moderating this session on stormwater, flood management, and maybe resilience a little more generally as well. And just like the last panel, we're going to have 4 cities and universities represented. And we're going to start off with the city of Baltimore. And our 2 panelists are Nancy Jones, who's a data manager with the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance of the Jacob France Institute at the University of Baltimore, and also Kim Grove, who's chief for the Office of Compliance and Laboratories on the city side for Baltimore City. So you 2 can come up.
Good afternoon. I want to thank you all for coming, and I also want to say thank you for that really lovely lunch. That was delicious. So I am Kim Grove. I am with the City of Baltimore Department of Public Works. We are responsible for water, wastewater, and stormwater, as well as solid waste management and sustainable energy. And Nancy is with University of Baltimore, which is one of 9 universities in the City of Baltimore. This photo right here is showing one of the green infrastructure small stormwater projects that the city has started to install starting in 2009. For some of you, you may be familiar with it. It's known as the Watershed 263 project. So for some of you who feel like you know Baltimore because you've watched The Wire, let me tell you that it's a little bit different than what you saw. We are a port city. And when most folks think about water in Baltimore, they'll think about the Inner Harbor, which is in the top left. But just as much, we have almost 40 miles of stream. But our streams are really degraded because of all of the runoff that's happening. The center photo right there, that is not black and white. That truly is how much pavement and rooftop and impervious area that we have in our downtown area. We actually like to use the term ultra-urban. And just the top left photo is showing what it looks like. You have the row homes that go right up to the sidewalks, that go right into the streets, and the runoff from those roofs are directly connected to the storm drain system. But never fear, we are slowly but surely trying to add more green. The large swaths of forest that we do have in the city were part of the planning elements when the city was first being established, and Olmsted actually had a large hand in that. But what that means is you have large swaths that are not necessarily connected, and you can have blocks and blocks of full pavement, full concrete. But we have a huge amount of communities. In fact, we have over 240 neighborhoods, and you have folks who take pride in those neighborhoods and want to participate and volunteer in helping to bring stormwater management and greening patterns into the city. Baltimore does have a fully separated system. This is very rare on the East Coast for a city its age and size. We have, you can see some of the numbers underneath. Just to give you a sense, the mileage of storm drain system can take you from New Haven down to St. Augustine, Florida, and we fit it all in about 9 miles by 9 miles of land. So we have a lot of dense pipe networks. A lot of our streams are actually piped so that those streams are still being carried in large 100-year-old systems. The other part to look on this map is to realize that water does not abide by politics, and so watersheds we share with our surrounding counties. The city is under an MS4 permit which is put out by EPA and administrated by the state. And for the city of Baltimore and also the 9 other counties in the state of Maryland, that means we're driven by water quality more than anything else. And the state of Maryland is one of 6 states that is part of the Chesapeake Bay TMDL program, which means there's a huge focus of reducing nutrients and sediments by 2025. So that has been the main driver for our current permit. The permit is a 5-year permit, and it's actually requiring us to restore 20% of our impervious area by 2018. That Bay TMDL is underlain and supported by 7 other local TMDLs for nutrients and sediments. And even though we have a major deadline to be happening by the end of this permit, we got more to do afterwards. On top of that, the projects that we usually are putting in for stormwater management are really good for sediments and nutrients. Not so good for the other pollutants that are impairing our waters, including toxins like PCBs, you have bacteria, and then trash, because Baltimore is the 4th location to have a trash TMDL in the United States. So how we look at impervious area is we take a look at the total area. We take out the federal and state because local government does not have jurisdiction on those lands. We also take out other permitted locations. What's left is our MS4 area with a large amount of impervious area. In fact, for the city of Baltimore, we are about 40% of our land is impervious. If you compare that to the counties, then impervious is about 7 to 10% compared to the total land. Taking that impervious, we look at what's been controlled already, and since most of our build-out happened prior to the 1950s, Clean Water Act wasn't anything. So we didn't have a lot of controls. So we have a large amount that we still have that's not controlled, and then our target area that we have to go for that 20%. Right now, our target is 4,291 acres. The problem is that we do not own a lot of land. Outside the right-of-way, it's only 5% of the parcels, or equates to 6% of the impervious area out of the right-of-way. If you want to do all the numbers crunching really quickly, at the end of the day, 4,291 acres is about 8% of the total land in the city that we would then have to treat. So we have a lot of challenges working with that. And to meet that target control, we could rely on development, and Washington, D.C. has done a great job with their green roofs. They have a lot of development going, so they can hit that mark. Or we can look at volunteers, your nonprofits, or your people who just want to improve water quality. But that even though I've got that red circle, really that red circle is pretty small. So everything else relies on DPW to do. We developed a watershed implementation plan, which was a combination, instead of P3s, we did the 3 Ps: projects, programs, and partnerships. And the projects are the things that we're going to be talking about today with the mapping. It is, what are those kickable things at the end of the day that will be done? And I said that we have a lot to do in this permit, but the next permit's going to be even harder to get to. So what we're starting to do with this mapping tool is to start to garner on these partnerships so that volunteer and development will enable us to put in more green infrastructure and stormwater projects in the future. Oh, and if you're looking at the budgets, yes, we do have a stormwater fee that has allowed us to start doing a lot of the stormwater management work. So Baltimore City is one of 7 locations, pilot locations, that was part of the Urban Waters Federal Partnership under President Obama. It was an unfunded partnership. Wow. Unfunded partnership, and that's where we came in with the mapping, and I will now turn it over to Nancy.
Did I just hear wow?
Yeah, because it's just
I saw that. Okay. All right, so the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance, we are a small research unit in the University of Baltimore. In 2000, we started as an alliance, a nonprofit alliance, and in 2007, we needed a new home. So the university was happy to take us in. They saw opportunity. We compile, clean, and analyze data on a variety of topic areas, and we maintain it in a longitudinal database that I built. We are also networked with the Urban Institute and 35 other cities in the National Neighborhood Indicators Partnership, and we focus on data democratization, or bringing data to communities. Locally, we partner with the City of Baltimore on data analysis, program evaluation, and interactive mapping tools. So Vital Signs is our signature project, and it's funded by the Annie E. Casey Foundation. It started in 2000. We put out about 150 indicators, give or take, based on the data we get in, and we aggregate it to the neighborhood level. Now, as Kim said, we have over 240 neighborhoods that are recognized in the city of Baltimore. However, to do a good longitudinal look at that, we've created 55 community statistical statistical areas that you see right here, and they're aggregates of census tracts, and that way I can really look at the data over time. But for instance, some of these indicators are the percent of housing under mortgage foreclosure, we look at poverty, we look at race, and we look at student achievement.
We actually used some of the vital signs maps when we developed the watershed implementation plan, looking at both social as well as environmental indicators that they had.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to that in another slide as well. So then the Office of Sustainability in Baltimore created this green pattern guidance document to address, there's more than 18,000 vacant lots in the city. And from this model, we began to partner with the Urban Waters Partnership, and we compiled data about the green pattern types. And we started with initial funding to look at community managed open space or community gardens throughout the city, and we have just under 1,000 of those. And since that time, we were able to then up our partnership and get more funding. And so we looked at urban forest buffers and tree planting sites throughout the city. And we've had 2 different funding streams with DPW to look at stormwater management sites. We began that by mining data from their small watershed action plans. And the data literally was from 2008 and prior. That was, did I just hit that?
Yeah.
I apologize. And then we've moved on from those potential stormwater management sites to more active sites that are part of this MS4 reporting requirement, that in the regulatory reporting requirement that Kim talked about. So did you want to talk about the other
So
cog?
our role in looking at this was the vision. We had already a georeference database that we were going to have to submit for regulations, but the vision of this tool was that it could be used for communication of where projects were going to go, for planning of where projects could be or where projects don't work, and also for researchers to look at where projects are going and what are some of the other trends from a socioeconomic way that that we're seeing once you have the installation of green infrastructure as well as these other green patterns. So they're the icing on the cake that I was already baking.
So our process is, so I go out and I get the data, and I call it Sneakernet. So I compile data from disparate sources. With stormwater management, it's been somewhat easier because I got it primarily from the Department of Public Works, but now I'm expanding that to get it from NGOs and any other data source where there might be private development or landscape architects that might have stormwater management sites that otherwise wouldn't be in a database. I integrate it into a master database, and then we've developed an interactive mapping tool that's online. And currently, we're in a state where we're having users, mostly from the Federal Urban Waters Partnership, do beta testing to tell us what's most useful for them. And then what our value added from BINA is that we have all those socioeconomic indicators, and we can integrate that. And so then we can look at the proximity of these environmental sites to socioeconomic factors. And then we can see how can this feed into the green vision for Baltimore to improve the quality of life for everybody and the environmental runoff. And so, did you put that last thing? And then our future iterations, we're always looking for more funding. We earlier this year put in a grant to the EPA, a proposal to the EPA, and we'll be looking for more funding from DPW and other sources. We always want to improve the user experience. We are a group of planners and geographers and not computer scientists or web developers, so we are always looking for more funding to improve our UX UI interface. Improve our data acquisition process and get everybody who provides me with the data to really understand why their Excel spreadsheet needs to kind of merge a little bit better with the database I get from DPW or Baltimore Green Space or any other group that has a database. And finally, we want to do better education and dissemination through social media and other tools. So thank you.
Okay, so we have time for Nancy and Kim for a couple of questions. And please wait till you get a microphone to ask your question.
Anyone?
I'm curious I'm curious when you showed how much impervious surface there is. Are there any projects to breaking through some of those impervious surfaces in neighborhoods that might be interested in having a green space? Is that?
There is, and so we actually have a large amount of vacant land, so there's a lot of demolition that's coming in. But last night we did a tour of some of the green infrastructure that's coming around the edge of Yale University, and I looked at them with jealousy because they have great underlying soils of sand and everything. Our underlying soils are compacted clay, so even though you may be greening and we can add more elements like trees, it's still not the greatest and not the most effective for pollutant reduction. But we are working towards that, yes. Everyone's nice and full.
One more over here.
Hi, thanks for being here. I was just curious if you could talk a little bit about how you were able to achieve the stormwater fee within your city. What were the political hurdles in order to achieve that?
That's a whole other hour-long presentation.
It's a rain tax.
No, that's the,
that's
yes. So the easiest way is we had the concept going back to 2008, and then it was not until 2012 that the state actually put a mandate that all MS4 jurisdictions had to have a fee. So we were ready for it, and we worked through our council to first have a referendum to create a stormwater utility, which is an enterprise fund, and then to create the fee. We got it in right at that deadline, and then that was in 2013. We had an election, got a new governor who said, I'm going to take away that mandate, and some of the counties did step down from having a fee. We kept ours, and that's how we have a fee.
Great. Well, you'll have an opportunity to ask more questions during the panel section, but I think we will thank Karen Nancy right now. Thank you. In theory, we would now have the partnership represented by Grant Irvin, who's the Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Pittsburgh, but he missed a flight yesterday and despite valiant efforts was unable to join us here today. And graciously, Anna Stiefkin has agreed to cover both sides for the City of Pittsburgh.
It'll be double.
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 Right. Double. Absolutely double. She's the Associate Director for Innovation and Strategic Partnerships at Carnegie Mellon University, their Scott Institute for Energy Innovation. So, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's very nice to be here today. I want to start with a little bit of information, and Grant, I know you're watching, so my phone is right there if you'd like to text or send me any information if I miss anything. I'm very excited about being here today, and I appreciate the opportunity. I love talking about Pittsburgh. A little bit about the demographics. We have about 305,000 who live in the city, about 1 million in the county, and in the 10-county region, about 2.5 million. We have 35 universities. We graduate 41,000 students a year. We have about 169,000 students at any given time. And since Grant's not here, I can talk a lot about CMU, which is awesome because we have about 5,000 faculty, about 1,400 students, and for the first time ever, our freshman class is half female. So that's a really big deal in computer science. You can definitely clap for that. We do a lot of work and are well known for computer science, robotics, artificial intelligence. The first autonomous vehicle was actually driven in Pittsburgh in 1983. So we're leading in technology, and that all feeds directly into what I'm going to talk to you today, which is Pittsburgh's effort in resiliency, and that's where stormwater comes in for us. This partnership was built, it's called 1PGH, it's our resilient planning, and it's been a multi-year process with an amazing mayor, who I'll talk about in just a minute. We actually have 4 pillars. I saw that Baltimore also has 3 pillars starting with P. We are teaching our folks that it is not pierogies, pizza, penguins, and pirates, but it's actually people, place, planet, and performance. So everything that we do as a city is marked against those metrics. How are we doing for the entire community? In fact, we were one of the finalists for the Smart City Challenge, one of the 7 finalists. And our whole strategy for that was if it's not for everyone, it's not for Pittsburgh. So I know a lot of questions about equity have come up, and when you talk about stormwater, you absolutely get into equity-related issues. We look as we're one of the 100 resilient cities, which is a Rockefeller Foundation program. We are very excited to be in the second cohort of that program, but what it does is give us some funding so that we can do some of this work. Grant Urban, who is not here, is the Chief Resilience Officer, which means his job day in and day out is to be thinking about these issues. We look at it in terms of shocks, which are those short-term bursts, things that can really damage your geography, as well as stresses, those long-term, slow-burning, underlying things that can really impact a society. And as you'll see, when you talk about climate change, extreme weather, aging infrastructure, stormwater is at the bottom of all of those things. In fact, Grant likes to think about it, whether it's the water in our 3 rivers or the water in his basement, absolutely it's important to everyone. So when we look at the strategy that we came up with, we actually had a community-based engagement program that was really focusing on how to understand exactly where the confluence was. Because if you look at a map of Pittsburgh, we have a lot of green space and a lot of blue space. So we are the point, which is our downtown area, is the confluence of 3 rivers. The Monongahela, the Allegheny become the Ohio. We actually have an aquifer underneath that we leverage for fountains and some of the buildings in our downtown. But as you can see, we have a lot of green space, and we have a lot of opportunity for areas where we can really think about this. So when we start talking about partnership between CMU and the city, we actually formalized it with an MOU. So we have a partnership in place that's at the highest level of our organization so that we can really bring problems and solutions together. So these are some of the things. This is our mayor, Bill Peduto. Many of you have mentioned his name. He has become very internationally known because of statements in the national press. And we believe that Bill Peduto has actually done a tremendous amount for our city. These are some of the things. We have this leadership alignment. We have the MOU that I mentioned. We actually talk a lot about citizen solutions. We have a community-based approach to a lot of our decision making. And we have a model that we use at Metro 21, which is a program of CMU that's research, develop, deploy. So we use the city as a living laboratory for a lot of our technologies. So Metro 21 is actually one of the institutes within CMU, and it actually has some of its own funding from one of our founding fathers, Henry Hillman, who had a vision that said we actually needed to put some money into the city in order for it to thrive. And so we do have funding in some ways, but really what we do is we look for that intersection of what our academics would be interested in, what's needed for our city, and we bring that together with seed funding, and then we go out and find additional funding. So we do have transportation centers and that sort of thing that are federally funded within Carnegie Mellon. Research, develop, deploy, the most important part of what we do. We want to make sure that we're actually seeing results and that our research is going where it needs to. So here's another picture of Pittsburgh in case you have not seen it. It's a beautiful place. This is not what it looked like in 1940 and 1950. And I remember UC Davis was talking about what the kinds of decisions they were making. This was the ashtray of the United States in 1940. We would float oil down our river. It was absolutely, the skies were black. We had 27 coal power plants on the water, just dumping waste into our water. It was absolutely, it was our backyard bathroom. And so it's interesting to see how we've changed over time. By the way, when you think about it, so our downtown center is called the Golden Triangle. That's where our federal offices are and that sort of thing. Carnegie Mellon is right back there. So the proximity actually is really nice because we're able to work closely together. We have a bus rapid transit system, talking back to our transportation conversation, that links Oakland and downtown. We're working on it in earnest. So the way that this happens is that the city comes forward with a problem. Metro 21 serves as a doorway, and then we actually match up faculty and their interests across all of our centers. So it serves as a gateway process and has been extremely effective. Let's talk about stormwater management specifically. So when we talk about the ways that this works, we actually have 88 municipalities, 90 neighborhoods, and every single one of them has their own governance structure. So when you want to lay a pipe or create a new project, you might have 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 different municipalities that some have home rule, some have mayors, some have council people, So it's a very interesting spot. We have those 3 rivers, and then we have about $4 billion that needs to be put into our infrastructure over time. So let's talk about a couple of those projects, and I'm actually going to focus first on CMU's campus, because interestingly enough, stormwater is a huge problem for us. We flood on a regular basis. Our neighboring communities flood directly into our campus. So we've had major flood events just within our buildings. The largest project that we recently did is in the center, the biggest circle. We put in a 275,000 gallon cistern, and we use the water for processed water for the buildings around it. Here's a couple of those projects. Here they are putting in that underground cistern. We've put in rain gardens, which you'll notice are named Cohen, after Jerry Cohen, who worked at Yale. He says hello. And then we have a reflection garden that we actually took sort of a dead space and made it into a rain garden. But this is what we have. I mean, when we're a city in rivers, this is a road and this is Washington Boulevard. This is just a road that we use. We've had deaths. We had several deaths a few years ago due to flooding. We have any number of things that have happened in terms of flooding that are dangerous. And so some of our study has actually been in understanding the attitudes that people have about local stormwater adaptation and risk. Another project that we've done actually looks at before and after with sensors around, and these are 3 different areas where we put in sensors to understand how the watersheds are working before and after infrastructure is put in place. And this is actually Route 51, which is a highway system. It actually goes to Large, Pennsylvania, which I think is kind of a neat thing. But anyway, before you get to Large, there's transportation issues, water issues. So this was a full study of how that corridor could impact. So one of our pictures, this picture here is actually, we have on our waterfront 178-acre brownfield. And so we're in the process of putting Amazon right there. just had to put that in there. But we actually have had a lot of sites come forward, but this happens to be a particular site. That mill building is 1 million square feet. And we're looking at this in terms of how do we build the greenest, most efficient, water conserving new neighborhood in this incredible corridor opportunity. And finally, at CMU, we actually have done a lot in terms of bringing thought leadership together. So this is the heads of our utilities, the head of the university, our mayor, our county executive. So we try to bring people together to actually convene the right groups at the right times. And finally, in terms of creation of collaboration, we've put together something called the Deliberative Forum. And that's bringing community people, again, together to understand their thoughts, their attitudes, what's important to them. Because we feel like if we're really going to make something work for Pittsburgh, it's got to work for everyone. And that's it.
So, we definitely have time for some questions. Does anyone have a question for Anna?
Over there.
So the local watershed stewardship organizations, I think there was one, the 3 Mile River or something.
It's 9 Mile Run.
9 Mile Run. Mm-hmm. So how are they part of the partnership, or are they just in a different area of the watershed? And then the question is kind of bordering on: do you host? I mean, this is a lot about data and policy, but do you host a watershed stewardship organization at the university?
So we do have quite a few of our researchers who are focused specifically on water. I don't know the exact number. I would say it's dozens of people who are actually looking at water as a challenge. 9 Mile Run is actually the project that I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong slide. This is actually looking at that particular watershed. So we have partnerships where we bring in the nonprofit community. In fact, one of our foundations recently said that we're in our 3rd renaissance, and they think it's being brought together by the nonprofit community for the first time, because the first and the second were really, industry. So we absolutely partner with the entire community when we're doing projects. Did I answer both parts of your question? I forgot to mention, we actually are another city that has combined sewer overflow. it's a huge issue. So we do a lot of work where we're trying to actually figure out how to mitigate that, particularly because our storm challenges are so big. Over here.
Thank you. I'm Cynthia Jennings, and I'm on the Environment Committee in Hartford on Hartford City Council, and we're dealing with the issue of stormwater, the combined stormwater. What have you done so far in terms of local infrastructure and projects that are not a big deep tunnel to just drop everything into? What have you done that can actually be implemented in a moderate-sized city?
So I'm actually so glad that you mentioned that, because I forgot to mention that we're actually under violation for the Clean Water Act with the federal government. It's because we put together a gray program with big pipes, and they came back and said, nope, that's not going to work. So we actually are in violation of that currently, and so we've put together a charrette of folks, again, bringing in the community to look at hyper-localized projects. We have one in our South Side neighborhood, which is not on our map, but the South Side neighborhood, looking at an entire corridor of a road and figuring out how could we actually restructure that particular section to deal with water that would be coming down from an entire neighborhood. So we are doing within our, much like what you'll see here in New Haven, we are working with stormwater management at the street level. There are a couple of our municipalities, of those 90, that actually are doing some pretty innovative things in terms of water management. We have a community called Millvale, another community named Mount Lebanon, that are working on things that are very specific and smaller scale. But it's fits and starts, and there are people that spend much more time on that particular topic than I do. I'd love to pass the question on if you want to give me your card. Back here in the back.
Hi, I was wondering if you could talk about how the university sort of got on board with this partnership. Yale does have partnerships with the city of New Haven, but we don't. I don't think there's necessarily a lot of focus around innovation as you guys have. And I was just wondering, how did that get started? How did the university, from the university side, did that happen?
So there's a couple of ways, I think. First, we've had some pretty extraordinary champions, some of them students, some of them faculty, some of them leadership, that have come forward with these projects. There's a gentleman, Rick Stafford, who works on Metro 21, and one of the things that he's been doing for as long as we can all remember is sitting in meetings and listening for challenges and listening for problems, and then not going to the city and saying, hey, can you fund this? But actually saying, city, can you partner with me? And then the two of us go together and try to find funding. So many projects come down to funding. We actually, because our mayor and this leadership that we've had over the last however many years has been so focused on propping us up. I mean, we're a city that lost half of our population in the 80s. And we are, we have empty buildings, we have infrastructure challenges, just like every other old city, right? Because that's what we are. We're an old city. We somehow avoided being torn down in the 90s for a giant shopping mall. Somebody wanted to put a mall in the middle of our downtown. We've had people that actually stood up, like our conference, the Allegheny Conference, which is like our chamber, and they were able to actually help stop some of these bad things that were going to happen. So it's community leadership, it's university leadership, and again, it's that web of people coming together that I think has really helped Pittsburgh. We have about 100,000 jobs open right now, so we have housing that's affordable. So if any of your students would like to come to Pittsburgh, we are open for business.
Thank you, Anna. I have some questions I think that you will be, I'll pose to perhaps during the discussion session. Let's thank you right at this point first. And especially for doing double duty. Our third pair of panelists come from Cambridge and Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So first we have Brian Goldberg, who is a graduate of our school, probably the most illustrious after Aldo Leopold. And he is the project manager for the Office of Sustainability with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And then on the city side, we're fortunate to have John Bolduc, who is the environmental planner for the city of Cambridge. So, and I should have advanced the slide. Oh no, that's going backwards. That's going. Oh, we had jumps. There we go. So, thanks. To the next slide.
So thanks to the Hixon Center for the opportunity to participate. And I'm the environmental planner because all the new planners are sustainability planners, so it just shows my age. But Brian and I are going to talk about what climate change means to our community, focusing today on the on one area of impacts related to flood risk. So we'll talk about what kind of flood risk we're seeing being projected for Cambridge, why it makes sense for MIT and the city to work together on a response to these growing risks, and describe a few of our collaborative efforts. So the city and the campus that we have today are largely designed and constructed based on historic patterns of precipitation, sea level, and temperature. So basically the city and the campus are built for the past. And some of the conditions that we have in Cambridge were modified historically to make the city more suitable for development. So wetlands were filled, seawalls were built, dams were constructed to protect against high water and regulate tidal flows and so forth. So on the map on the left, you see a historic map of Cambridge. This is depicting the late 1700s, and this is the Charles River here. So you can see all this hatched area is basically mostly tidal wetlands. So these tidal wetlands were extensive and reached throughout the city, including the far end of the city. This is called the Alewife area today. And the Mystic River, I should point out, is up here outside the city, but we have a major tributary running to it. And you can see at MIT, which was built about 100 years ago, was built in this filled land. Okay. All right. So this just gives you another perspective on Cambridge. So this is sort of looking at Cambridge if you were floating over Boston Harbor and looking to the west. So Cambridge is over here. This is Somerville here, and Boston's down here. So we have the Charles River, we have the Mystic River, and Alewife Brook up here. So before the dams were built in the early part of the 20th century, Cambridge was more directly connected to the ocean through these rivers, tidal rivers and streams. And the Charles River, well, actually the old Charles River Dam is there, and that was built around 1906, and the new Charles River Dam is in here, which was built around in the late 1970s, and the Amelia Earhart Dam is there. We went from a city that was intimately connected to the ocean to being basically cut off from it. But what climate change means to Cambridge and to MIT is that we can, no longer assume that we're going to have this stable kind of climate that we've had in the past, and that these future conditions are going to be different in terms of sea level, precipitation, and temperature. So I think that implies that the city is going to have to modify its current urban form for these new conditions that are coming in the future. And one of the things we see is that it seems with sea level rise that the ocean is basically going to be trying to reclaim some of the land that we took from it many years ago. And I'll show you a map later that shows that better. So Because of these projected changes in climate, the city decided around 2010 that that climate change impacts are no longer to be avoided. We've been working on climate change since the late 1990s and focused initially on mitigating greenhouse gas emissions when we all thought that we could still prevent climate change. I think maybe about 10 years ago we started to realize there would be a certain amount of climate change that's unavoidable. So in 2010 we received direction from the city manager after he got a recommendation from our climate advisory committee that the city should do a climate change vulnerability assessment and start preparing for climate change impacts. So one of the concerns that we have is with flood risk. So we already have flood risk in Cambridge, and the photo in the upper right shows the results of 4 inches of rainfall falling in 1 hour in July of 2010, causing a lot of street flooding throughout eastern Cambridge, and this is near the MIT campus. So we already have problems like this today, and this is largely the result of Cambridge being very flat, and I think sort of a little bit what we heard about New Haven. It's hard for the water to kind of flow out to the ocean, also for the ocean to flow back in through the pipes. And also we're highly impervious, about 74% impervious between our buildings, streets, and other types of surfaces. So basically our system can't handle these kinds of storms. But with climate change, we're expecting the rates of precipitation to go up. We've already observed over the past few decades that extreme precipitation events have gotten more extreme. And so we're projecting, based on climate science, that these kinds of events are going to become more frequent and more severe. And so what we did is we took climate projections for the years 2070 and 2030 and plugged those precipitation rates into our stormwater models. And basically projected, well, what's Cambridge going to look like if it sees more water in the future and we don't do anything to modify our urban form and our systems. And so basically what we see, the upper right is under present 100-year 24-hour conditions, and this would be the 2070 when you're going from about 8.9 inches to about over 11 inches for those events. And we see almost a doubling of the area of Cambridge that would be subject to flooding in the future. So, and we're also concerned about sea level rise and storm surge flooding. Historically, Cambridge has not experienced storm surge flooding, even though we're very proximate to the ocean. And a large part of that is because of the protection we get from those 2 dams that I showed you on the earlier map. They keep storm surges at bay. Working with a model, the Boston Harbor Flood Risk Model that the State Transportation Department developed, in which we coordinated with them and extended that up the Mystic River, which they weren't initially concerned about for the purposes of their work. We see that under assumptions that sea level could go up about 3.4 feet by 2070, and that was based on NOAA projections. In this model, which is a very dynamic model, that we see storm surges being able to get into Cambridge, and counterintuitively, the area furthest from the ocean is the area that has the greatest risk. By 2070, at the level of sea level that we're assuming, that's about a 20% annual risk of flooding there. And in the MIT area, it's less. It's actually less than 1% by 2070. But there are a lot of high value assets in here, including all the MIT research facilities, the life science industry, and the MBTA, Red Line subway, and things of that sort. And so 1% risk level, which is kind of the common thing that we tend to focus on, is, I think, still too high for those kinds of assets. So, and then you can see where MIT is and all of that. So I think Brian's next. If I can get it to the.
Why do we need to address these issues collectively? I was a Hixon fellow here 15 years ago, and I studied partnerships. And the lessons I learned from 15 years ago still apply, that when we have these really big challenges that are bigger than us, we got to work together. And then second, I've got to find the really smart people in the room who know what they're talking about and stick close to them. So that's why MIT and the city are working together. As has been discussed, MIT and the city are interrelated, and it's really hard to define where's the campus and where's the city, and that's the challenge that I think we've heard a lot this morning. At MIT, we're using an approach, we're calling it our campus resiliency framework, of how do we understand the complexity of an urban campus. So we're looking at layers. We have our site systems, our utilities, our buildings, this is where the magic happens, and then our people. And that a resilient MIT continues its purpose in the face of these risks. Each of these layers needs to be resilient in its own right. So this is helping us understand how the challenges John spoke about are affecting our campus. So that's great that we understand that, but now what we realize is that this is a future flooding map showing 2070 flooding from precipitation, that if our community layer, if we have about 80% of our staff and faculty that comes from outside of campus, if they can't get to campus because they're trying to take the T, which is our mass transit system, which may go through some flooded areas, then we don't have a resilient MIT. And similarly, our buildings, we could have the most flood-proof buildings in the world, but if the fire department in Central Square is surrounded by water, then those buildings are really susceptible to fire, and there's no one to fight the fire. So you get the point. Our systems are interdependent. Our campus is interdependent with the city, and we have every interest in the world to work together. John will talk very briefly about how we're working together, and then a few things of what we're doing.
Right. So when the city launched the vulnerability assessment, we knew from the beginning that Cambridge, the city government in Cambridge, was not going to make the Cambridge more resilient on its own. That everyone in the city, the businesses, residents, and institutions also need to participate and be part of the solution. And so we designed the assessment to be an open process and a process where people would be involved. So we drew on the academic expertise that was available with an expert advisory committee to advise us on our methods. We had a stakeholder advisory group that included from MIT, the facilities, folks from the facilities department, excuse me. And we engaged the community through a lot of outreach, going to meetings at their venues to make them aware of what we were doing and to collect their input into this. And the city shared all of the data that it's generated through the study with others so that they have a starting point that's hopefully further down the road to get them going. And Brian will talk more about that, but the kinds of outputs that we've put out are these climate projections for the future, what Cambridge might look like with flood risks. We've done heat island mapping, we've done urban forest mapping and estimated the cooling effect of the urban forest, and we've done this physical and social vulnerability assessment identifying specific assets and neighborhoods that have higher vulnerabilities that need to be addressed. And we also, the assessment was basically meant to be the technical foundations to do our preparedness plan. But at the same time, we also realized that, we didn't have a good platform to collaborate. And you would think in Cambridge, between MIT and that other school down the street, whose name I won't mention, while I'm at Yale, you would think that we'd have some kind of system to collaborate better. But I think there's always historically been kind of a tense relationship between the city because we regulate a lot of activity at the universities. But around 2013, then Mayor Henrietta Davis used her bully pulpit basically to convene. Okay, so basically we've created a compact between the two universities has since been joined by most of our large employers in the city to basically create a platform, and we have a 3-year strategic plan.
And in the interest of time, and now that my mic is on, there are 3 things we're working on. We're working on better understanding our precipitation flooding risks, and we're using some crazy probabilistic modeling that is evaluating 5,000 storms and what's the likelihood of each of these storms coming to the Cambridge area. That's one way we're working with the city. Another way is we're trying to get an understanding of storm surge risk. As many of you have probably understood from the hurricanes over the last few months, there's both rain that comes from big storms and storm surge, but the modeling does not actually measure both rain and precipitation totals with the same storms. So we're doing some probabilistic modeling with our researchers to evaluate how much rain can we expect with a storm surge. And that information is also helping. We'll be feeding it into the city and into our collective modeling. And then finally, the city has done a wonderful job in getting the lead on the vulnerability assessment and understanding some of the various icons or different services that are affected by flooding risks. We're working with the Cambridge Compact to do a hurricane planning exercise with a lot of businesses to see what do we do about this and how do we work together as businesses and the city. And with that, we'll close the talk, and we've identified some factors for how we're finding success working together, and we look forward to talking through these in the questions and answers.
Okay, to stay on our time schedule, we will defer questions to Brian and John until the panel discussion, and turn to our final pair of presenters from Birmingham today. We are fortunate to have Dr. Brian Pillay, who's the professor and chair of the Department of Material Science and Engineering at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and Dorikas Cooper, who's a stormwater specialist for the city of Birmingham, and they'll be telling us about a really interesting, specific example of collaboration.
Good afternoon. I'm Dorikas Cooper with the city of Birmingham, and we're glad to be here today, me and Dr. Pillay. We're just thankful for this opportunity, and what we're here to do today is kind of also going to take some of this knowledge and information back to the citizens of Birmingham and some of the leaders, let them know that we're kind of on the right path. We've been involved in doing watershed management plans, as well as some of the other things, some of the transportation things. So it's good to know that we're moving forward as well as some of our constituents. And I also would like to just kind of start by talking about what our project is. And it's basically what it is, what it says it is. It's put a lid on it. And I'm going to give you the background of that put a lid on. It's our redesign for our inlet tops. I don't know how many of y'all have inlet top problems, but we do in Birmingham. And in order to understand the problem, you just kind of got to know how long we've been dealing with this problem. We've been dealing with this problem for a while, and with partnering with UAB, it kind of was like, dang, we should have done this a long time ago. But we tried to do it on our own, and we went through many different trials and tribulations. Our first problem was we wanted to use iron, which we've been known as baby Pittsburgh in Birmingham, Pittsburgh of the South. So we wanted to use the iron, but y'all see that guy right there? We're looking for him because he's been taking the iron, selling it to recyclers, and even though that's illegal in Birmingham, I don't know how they're getting away with it. But if y'all find him, let him know we'll give him a job because he's costing us a lot of money. And also, the iron, it was still getting broken from time to time. So we decided to go towards concrete. We thought concrete would be a little bit better because we could build it in-house with our public works department. We could build it in-house, and it would be a little bit cheaper than using iron. But was concrete the answer? No, we still had a problem. Problem was, even though we were using concrete, it seemed like it was being destroyed more often. We would send guys, we'll get a call from 311, which is our environmental call center, and say, hey, come out and fix this inlet top. So we'll go out and fix it on Monday. Tuesday, we'll get another call and say, hey, it's broken again. So concrete was also, like I said, more expensive because we had to keep paying to get it redone. It also was contributing to our flooding problems that was in Birmingham. And it flooded a lot without the inlet tops. We had a lot of flood areas, so with the inlet tops being stuck in the drain, broken, and that even made the problem worse. And another thing, it was just ugly. If you can see that the metal frame is still there. We were just taking blocks and sticking it on concrete blocks and sticking it on top of the metal frame that was already there. So that was an issue. And one of the biggest issues was safety, lifting that big old concrete block. We had employees constantly being hurt. And also back in 1998, there was a 4-year-old girl named Jasper Moore during the storm event that she was visiting her grandma, and she opened up the door, she fell and went straight through an inlet, and she passed away. So that was a sign right there that said we needed to make a change. And like I said, we needed something different. We got tired of doing the same thing over, doing different things and getting the same results. So what our answer was, that guy right there. And just if you look at their model in itself, it's just knowledge that can change the world. And we had the knowledge right 5 minutes away. So we contacted Dr. Pillay. He put on a lunch and learn, and we got all our people together that we needed from the city to sit down at the table and listen to what he had to say. And we believed in what he had to say. So he said, Dorikas, give me a wish list. I said, okay. I said, Dr. Pillay, can you make it lighter? He said, yes, Dorikas. I said, Dr. Pillay, would this new design be stronger? He said, yes, Dorikas. I said, Dr. Pillay, can it be more appealing? He said, yes, Dorikas. And then I got to the fourth one. I said, Dr. Pillay, would this design be less expensive? He said, we'll work on it, Dorikas. but I was okay. I was okay with that because 4 out of 5 of yeses and a maybe was good for us. We needed an answer. So, and I even asked, and I even got kind of futuristic. I said, Dr. Pillay, can we have a QR reader on it? So we can keep up with our maintenance on every inlet top and help with our nomenclature. He said, of course, we'll work on that too. So we felt real good about the project, and we've been going. And I'm actually excited about this project because it's the first of its kind with the city where our engineering department is actually working with UAB to put forth a project of this nature. And this project covers 4 things that we really think are important. One is a smart green solution. We have a litter problem in Birmingham, and we're going to use recyclable materials. We're going to grab that litter and put it in this inlet top. We're also going to use this project as a business case to put together an incubator business for the city, as well as promote education. We're already doing stormwater education as far as teach citizens about floodplain management and flooding and stormwater, so we can add this as another component. And last but not least, we believe this project can create a safer, more cleaner city. And that's with all that together, I like, hey, we're doing good. We're in a win-win-win-win situation. So we're very excited about it, and our object is to put a lid on it.
So as you could see, there was a lot of pressure on me. But I bet you didn't expect 2 guys from Alabama coming here talking to you about sustainability, right? You don't normally hear Alabama and sustainability in the same sentence. Anyway, this goes into a little bit more of a technical area, and you can see what we were looking at is recycling, using recycled materials. So we generate a lot of solid waste, a lot of plastics in Alabama, and there's some numbers up there. But the idea was, can we use the recycled plastics that we generate to replace the concrete inlet tops, to give us a stronger, more resilient solution? So we selected some materials, and again, we based this on materials that were available to us in the state of Alabama. We looked at some resins, we looked at PBT, and HDP. HDP is just collective term for a lot of polyethylene, different types of polyethylene and stuff like that. But we get a lot of recycled materials over there. And we were using recycled glass fiber. We also looked at some fiber reinforced bars. And what you see in the, what you see here, this is a local company that produces a lot of power insulation bars, and we're taking their scrap product, or the idea is to use their scrap product in these instead of using steel reinforcement bars. And that's where our PBT comes from. And as you know, we now not just the Pittsburgh of the South, we're the Detroit of the South as well. So we've got a large automotive presence. That's where the HDPE or polyethylene recycling materials come from. At UAB, we've got a very, very large center that works on plastics and composites, and we thought we can use some of this expertise to generate some new materials that we could use for these inlet tops. There's the reinforcements we do, and these are just concepts, by the way. This is just to get some mechanical testing and data on this materials. So I'm not going to go through too much of that, but let's go to this slide here. Let's go to this slide here, and it shows you the different strength. So you know that question I answered, yes, Dorikas? That's concrete, and there's the materials we want to use, right? If you look at the strength, it's significantly higher. So obviously, impact is a big deal, so we had to test on impact as well. Oops, sorry. We go to impact, and again, you can see most of these materials perform extremely well in impact. We did some CAD modeling and design. We found that our designs of the inlet tops were poor, to say the least, and that's why they were breaking. So we went to, did some finite element modeling and looked at the way these things were supported, and the support system is poor. And one of the things they said to me, well, I talked to one of our flood civil engineers who worry about the quantity of water going through. He said, you can't put anything in there because it'll affect the flow. I said, if the tops are broken, you affected the flow anyway. So what's the point? So anyway, we went ahead, we did a whole bunch of things, and we came up with some new designs in terms of how we're going to try to mitigate the problem. And you can see we reduce our stresses significantly with this. And I know most of you love these pictures. It's not like what you saw of Pittsburgh and rivers and stuff like that. But anyway, we look at the weight on this. That other question was lighter. And here's the weight comparisons of what we project the covers to weigh. And that's the next stages of what we're going to be doing, right? I know I went through a lot of that data very quickly. And if you really want to know about the properties of this material, come and talk to me afterwards. We'll definitely take care of it. One of the things I do want to say is we don't have an MOU between the city of Birmingham and UAB. We are two people who met. Mm-hmm. He had a problem. He met me one day. We talked about it. And we decided we're going to put together this project. So I think early on somebody mentioned it's all about relationships. And this is what it is about. This is two people on the ground putting together a project. And we are looking to use this as a model for other projects where we can actually develop a MOU between the city of Birmingham and the university. Unfortunately, we have a tenuous relationship between the university administration and the city council. We're trying to work on that and improve it, but it's a challenge. With that, thank you for your time.
Today, I think we will move immediately to the panel, and any questions can be directed to all the panelists at that point. Great. Well, it's terrific how some of the comments I heard anticipate these questions. So I'm really looking forward to this. And just a few seconds ago, you were talking about this notion of how your particular partnership got started, and there are many different models that have kind of emerged. I think some that are very formal and some that are much more personal. And I'd be interested in hearing across the panel any comments that you'd like to make about your own situation in terms of the specific projects that you talked about today, or others that you know of, about how these collaborations get started. Is it, in some cases we see it's just two people who happen to know each other? Is it problem-based? Is it a greater desire on the part of the university and the city globally? And so I'll pose that question to anyone who wants to begin to answer it.
Maybe, seeing as I left with the last thought, I'll start with that. As I mentioned, this is one particular project. UAB takes up 100 city blocks in Birmingham. We are half the city. So we're a massive medical school, and there's a lot of programs that are taking place between UAB and the city. It's just that our leadership and our city council have some beef. And they, unfortunately, it doesn't prevent good work from being done. And when individuals meet and stuff like that, a lot of good things happen. So I didn't mean to suggest that we have a bad relationship. It's just officially we have a bad relationship. But the people, I mean, we live in the city, we work in the city, or just on the outside of the city, some of us live. But we work together very well. And a lot of times I find that when champions get together, the projects are a lot more meaningful and lead to a lot more fruitful results.
So the thing that I love about Pittsburgh is, and there are many things that I love about Pittsburgh, but the thing that I really love about Pittsburgh is that it's small. It's intimate enough that you really can make those personal connections, because even the MOU started with two people just talking about how to make this work. I think that it just takes strong leadership and people who are being innovative and thinking about the future. Because when in the middle of the sort of decline and demise of Pittsburgh as a city, there was a group of people who said, you know what, if we think forward, if we think ahead, and if we work together, we can actually make something that's going to be really great. And so having people with vision is a critical part of that, and it just takes two.
So for the city of Baltimore, we are larger, but we tend to have the term small to bore. And when the Urban Waters Federal Partnership came along on the local level, as partners, we already knew each other. We already worked with each other. For this particular project, University of Baltimore had already been doing the vital signs with the city of Baltimore, and the city had also encouraged and endorsed all the data that was coming out with it. So we were just building upon that. But the University of Baltimore is only one of 9 universities within the city. So from a city's perspective, we recognize that these relationships are not only great for looking at innovation and keeping the city at the forefront, but also looking at our workforce that's going to soon need to be filled. We want to make sure that those students that are coming in, a lot of them are coming from outside the state of Maryland, that are coming in want to stay and feel like they have a part of the city of Baltimore.
And I think in Cambridge, the universities are obviously, we're a small community geographically, and there's such big presences. There's not a lot that we can do without them being involved. So, but I think the key for us has been institutionalizing our relationship. So we have a climate advisory committee. So the universities are always represented on that since 2003, and so we've had a place to have this ongoing conversation about climate change. And then the schools have established their own sustainability programs and climate goals, and those have aligned with the city's goals. I don't think necessarily by accident. And then with the compact, which I talked too long so I didn't get to explain it, but that was founded with a written agreement that was signed by the mayor, city manager, and the presidents of the 2 universities, and subsequently all of the CEOs of the firms. that basically recognize climate change as a crisis, and that we all committed to work together in a collaborative way so that hopefully our results are going to be greater than the sum of all the individual efforts we're going through. And I think having those things institutionalized has been key to then give people like Brian and I sort of the license to take things forward.
Terrific. My second question, I'll ask you to think a little bit outside of this narrow focus on the university and the city and think about some other sectors. And so I'd be curious to know your thoughts about how these city-university partnerships and interactions compare with interactions with other entities like private firms, consulting groups, different levels of government, funding agencies. You know, what's special about the city-university connection?
From a consultant perspective, if I were to have put it out for bid, what I got back as a product would have easily cost me 5 to 10 times more than what I got out of the work that the university. And it's not like it's cheap labor. It's just they already had a distinct skill set that was there and it was honed with it. But in a lot of ways, when we're looking from stormwater management and sustainability at large, our universities are one of several stakeholder groups that we tend to work with. So we do include our local businesses, we do include the hospitals, the port, and also community members and religious organizations. So it's a collaborative voice that we hear.
Yeah, at the city of Birmingham in this project, it seemed like we have consultants as well, but it seemed like she said, this has been a whole lot more less expensive going to UAB instead of going to the consultants. And I like this is our first one with UAB, and I like the quality of work. Is me and Dr. Play, we can talk whenever we get it, whenever we want to, and it's just been a good relationship between the two of us. And I feel like I've been walking around looking for more problems that Dr. Play can solve.
I guess I don't build by the hour.
I think an important distinction with universities is, in Cambridge, the university's been there a long time and they're not going anywhere. And so they have the long-term perspective that businesses don't necessarily have. So we can talk to MIT about what 2030 and 2070 might look like. We talk to businesses, and we do, about that as well, and they get it, but they don't have a self-interest in having to think that far out, and so it's very valuable to have that partner, not to mention sort of the intellectual firepower that they have. They can bring a lot of technological and other skills to bear on these problems that we're not going to have in-house or even to be able to hire from consultants.
I want to say something about, the data sharing. As a university who's been asking for free data for nearly 20 years, it's really nice to be able to partner with cities and do something applied that really shows that, hey, we don't just collect your data and study their people, but we actually do work that helps you improve what you do. So it is beneficial to us as a university to partner up.
Mm-hmm. So we enjoy our sort of spot as trusted advisor. And I think it's a really important role, and it's very much to what you said, which is we're unbiased about we want the outcome to happen, but we're unbiased about the means in which it happens sometimes. We're not, we're agnostic to technologies in a lot of ways. We can look at it much more broadly. We can create data that's needed for other people. There's a collaborative nature to it. Students get involved. And we are training that next generation. But this research, develop, deploy becomes critical to actually getting at the end game. And so for us, that's a really nice way to focus.
Okay, I do want to open the questions to the audience, but I have one more selfish one that I'd like to ask first, which is as a faculty member. And I've seen both in this morning and this current session, a lot of times these the beginning of these relationships are kind of at an administrative level, and there are exceptions, but I mean, faculty don't necessarily seem to be the driving force. And, you know, as a faculty member myself, I think it's a little bit understandable because of the, you know, the faculty have a certain set of goals and reward system related to tenure and so forth. And I'm just wondering, both for those of you based in universities and from those in cities, you know, how do you engage faculty, which are such an important part of the university, and I think are not always the ones that are at the forefront of the beginnings of these things, at least.
What's been really exciting at MIT is actually some of our faculty members have been the drivers of the conversation through their research interests. Professor Carey Emanuel is, when I showed some graphs of probabilistic rainfall, that's his field, and he had the opportunity through our climate resiliency planning to downscale what he's been doing globally to a physical place, which had not been done before. And so that's a publishing opportunity. It's new work, and it's a way to not only bring his work down to the ground, but it's also a way to make it available for others. And I think that's been very important to some of our researchers. And then the additional benefit is for some of the researchers involved at MIT who've been involved in this work, it's giving them a platform to now test their ideas with the city and with real, actual planning. And there's almost a feedback loop that's happening as the faculty is now learning how to calibrate their work to be better responsive with their modeling, which then is more responsive to the application. So the incentives are all over the place.
I would actually add on to that, which is it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. So if we want our faculty to be focused on students and their research, you know, sitting in city meetings and listening for opportunities takes a lot of time. And there are faculty that they're not as interested because they went to 10 meetings and nothing happened until that 11th meeting. So in some cases, we can sort of look at it, at least from my position, and sort of see the whole system and like what's needed, and if we need an economist, or if we need computer scientists, or if we need someone from the College of Fine Arts or architecture, we can actually pull those teams together. So we're bringing them opportunities that they never would have seen. And in many cases, what we'll do is a project will come in, we'll see a new opportunity, and we'll send it out to the whole slate of people who would be interested in that area, and then they can choose. Like, do I want to be a part of this, or do I not? Is this in line with what I want to be looking at, or can I tweak it so that it is? So we actually are bringing them more and new opportunities through our city partnership that they wouldn't have had to sit through 11 meetings to get to.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, in Cambridge until recently, I was basically doing what Dorikas is doing, is I'm going out there and pitching my needs to researchers. And what in Cambridge, anyways, what I has found that is that, you know, I have to match what I want to what the researcher wants to do. They're not really going to customize a lot, a solution that's going to fit my needs. I kind of have to fit into their process. But that said, I think recently, especially since we now have this platform to work on resilience, and we're starting to get more of that connection between the administrative side of the university and the research side, and then be able to work together in that way.
I liked the previous on the transportation. One of the presenters had said the city has become a living lab, and that really spoke to me for you know, just having that proximity that you can see, not only think theoretically from a faculty standpoint, but then to have it applied at a local level that you can then show your student now, your student from 5 years from now, how that works.
Right.
It's impressive.
And the city has something to offer in terms
Right.
of data, access to public spaces or public facilities like street light poles to put sensors on, for instance. So that can be an attraction for a researcher.
Terrific. Well, let's open the questions to the audience, and especially for the two of you pairs who were unable to answer questions earlier. And please do wait for a microphone to come around.
Hi, Juan No, New Haven resident. Great example of 5 cities, you know, different demographic, you know, different problem. You all try to solve it with partnership with a university down the street. I saw the same problem in New Haven trying to work with Yale also. everybody are provincial. They like to think that they're unique. They like to reinvent the problem and reinvent the wheel and try to come up with the same solution or a little tweak here and there. I think it's, from what I've seen so far, is a waste of resources, time, especially the urgency we're dealing with. And also, we don't really have good leadership at the national level anymore. You know, that's debatable, right? Can we come up with a platform to translate these knowledge into more practical use so that a new city that's just starting to do this don't have the same resources at Yale or at Carnegie or whatever? They can just go and, you know, get the resources.
Well, as far as Birmingham goes, in this project, I didn't really mention this earlier, but our city, we're spending over $500,000 a year to replace these concrete inlet tops. And by doing the 3-year pilot project, we only spent $600,000 over 3 years. And to put together a project, and when at the end of this, like I said, we expect to have a business plan where we can give citizens jobs and things. And I think that was and that was the risk that we took to kind of step outside the box and to do something different. And allow, we got a lot of old, what I call it, stinking thinking that is going on in Birmingham, where people don't want to change. They don't want to do anything new. So we feel like once they see this project a success and how we work and partner with UAB, other departments within the city will utilize UAB and their talents to help do more innovative things that can, like you said, future to change the world. So that's what we're trying to lean toward and trying to get people to think. That's why I'm so excited about this project with Dr. Fillet.
But I think too, there's another part of your question, which is how do you sort of get rid of the duplication? And I actually think that as a community, we're getting a little bit better at it. And the only reason is because we're pollinating with other cities. And so we're learning best practices at the city level through things like there's a sustainability network for different parts of city organizations. So they can actually learn from their peer cities, kind of like what we're doing here, because that's one of the things that we've done is actually compare notes while we're here. We're able to reach into other cities to hear their solutions so that we don't have to start over with the same problem in a different city. Like, we all have stormwater issues in our individual cities. We shouldn't each be starting at ground zero. We should be starting 3 steps up and then adapting that to our local environment. So these, it's getting together is actually really one of the best ways that I've seen that people are starting to learn. And this sustainable, I don't know what it's called,
Urban Sustainability
Directors Network is this fantastic organization that is helping cities really come together.
Well, one of the things I think also is that there are actually, there's not just one platform, there are several platforms. So trying to find that one where you feel like you have the most similarity. Not everyone's special, but we're not all the same. And especially when it gets to the political side where you're going to make a large investment, they'll want to see how it actually fits a little bit better into their community and have to go through that pilot. With us, when we were looking, because we were doing this through the Urban Waters Federal Partnership, the thing that we had in mind is it wasn't just we're going to do it for the city of Baltimore. We had to think about how are we then, once it's done for Baltimore, how are we going to expand it out for our communities, our surrounding counties, and then how could this also be used in other cities like Detroit, like the other cities that were part of it. So we had to think about growing this not just for the benefit of our town, but for the overall stormwater community.
And also on the university side, there's, just as the cities are networked, a lot of our universities are networked. And at MIT, one of our core missions as an Office of Sustainability is to try to understand how are we tackling these challenges and then communicating how we're doing it and what we're learning from others so that others can do it. Because we're not figuring it out, others are doing it as well. But a key part of our work is how do we communicate how we've figured it out or how others have figured it out so that other schools that may be less resourced can learn. And I think we're all getting better at that, but there's certainly more work to be done.
Hi, thanks for a great set of presentations. I just had a question and maybe a comment thrown in there as well. And I want to further complicate the nature of that relationship between city administration and the university. So over the last two sessions, most of the solutions that we've seen, and there are some exceptions, particularly the move towards non-motorized transport, but most of the solutions have been problem-solving solutions, and I think those are solutions that quite naturally benefit a lot from university knowledge, where a professor stands to gain from a robust data set, becomes a hero or heroine in improving life in a city around, and the city gets expertise at less than nominal cost, right? But if I may be a bit blunt and call a spade, both on transportation or flood control or the next session, climate change, I think everyone in the room is fairly clear that it's a losing battle, all things considered, and it's a battle that looks like it's going to be lost. And in that context, what I'm interested in knowing is, does that cast the university in a special ethical position where you call the city out on its incrementalism, where you say that, hey, I can't come up with a smarter management system to deal with your cars? I think someone asked that question earlier today. I'm going to say again and again and again that we don't want more cars, right? And the same thing could apply to how water is used in a city and how water flow gets obstructed, so on and so forth. So in that light, I'm keen to hear, amongst all these positive stories, are there stories where the university has been the conscience in an uncompromising way, as opposed to, hey, finally administration's opening up, a great opportunity to partner and cut a ribbon and get photos in the paper? That's a standard good story, and I'm not belittling that. I mean, that's very required. But any stories where you've managed to bring back the ethics and the ecological question front and center?
I'm going to answer from the University of Baltimore perspective. We're not a research university, which hurts a little bit, but it also frees us up to do work. We're not advocates for our data. So we get all this data, and our primary focus is giving it to the community groups. So Baltimore has a lot of community development corporations, a lot of neighborhood associations, and a lot of communities that want to receive grant money to improve their neighborhoods. We will not advocate for a cause, but we will provide them their data, and we will help them understand how to use it. So we have an annual event called Data Day, where we make personal phone calls to community group leadership and say, please come, because we want more community representation than city government, who are our data providers in many cases, than academics. But we want academics to talk with community groups. We want city agency folks to also talk with community groups, but we want our primary focus is to get our data into the hands of the people that live in the neighborhoods that we're studying. Otherwise, it's, so that's what we do.
And so on this particular project, a lot of the other counties, they were putting out maps. I mean, to have a map where stormwater projects are going to be, that's nothing monumental. They were just going to say, here's where we're going to make the investments, but they didn't want to show where they weren't going to make those investments or why they weren't. We want to show it all. And we've even been talking with grant funders of how they can use this tool so that if they are actually looking at a grant application for another stormwater project or some other greening project, they can look at some of the other socioeconomic, in a way, bringing in some of that consciousness of the decision. They're not just looking at the environmental factor in making the decisions where those investments come in. The way that we feel is that this mapping tool is meant to be a mirror and an informed, a way to make an informed decision. It's not to make us look great.
The one thing I'm going to add to that is, you're right, the university has to make decisions on ethical issues. And with this particular project that we're doing, one of the things I said at the outset is, I believe I can do that. But I'm not sure that we can actually come up with I cannot give a guarantee. That's why it's a 3-year project. I cannot give a guarantee that we're going to give you a solution, but we're going to explore every opportunity to try to find a solution. The solution may be a total new inlet top. It may be the same concrete top that's redesigned. I mean, there's more to it. We had 12 minutes to present something that we've been doing for about 18 months. So I don't think there's an issue of crossing ethical lines or anything like that with what we're doing. We're a Research One university. We're about $500 million in research at UAB. And if we cross that line, we'd lose the majority of our funding. So we can't do anything that's unethical. We've got to maintain our ethics. We've got to maintain everything that we're doing with respect to, and then we publish as well. So in fact, we've just published an article based on this, and it goes through peer review. It goes through all of the ethical things that we typically will go through.
I think if I understood your question correctly, and since we're at the Center for Urban Ecology, that something that we need to do more of is think about cities as systems. We've tried to do that with our vulnerability assessment. We're about to do that was our first time we've done that assessment. We're going to be doing our first urban forest master plan, and actually we looked at Pittsburgh's plan because we really like that one. But looking at the urban forest as a system rather than just a bunch of street trees, because most of our urban forest is on private property, so that plan is going to address both public and private land. But I think looking at the city as a system hopefully gives you the ability to get beyond these incremental steps and start to make some leaps forward. But I don't know the full answer to your question.
Well, I hate to cut short this terrific dialogue, but we do have a break scheduled now, and we can continue the discussion there. There's two things I'd like to say about that. One is do please be back at 3 o'clock to begin the climate change panel. And also, while you're out there are thinking about the final event of the day, which at 5:15 there's going to be an action social, which is hosted by the Sci-City group here. And they've set up 2 whiteboards. And what they'd like you to do in anticipation of that social at the end of the day is to write down any thoughts or themes or ideas or questions that are coming to you as you are listening to these speakers as kind of a starting point for that final piece of the day at 5:15. And with that, I would like to ask you to thank this terrific panel.
Can we get a picture? Can we get a picture? Do you guys mind? Can we get a picture? We can put the regular slide up there. Okay.
Okay.
I want to get my camera so I can
Okay. Whoa. Here's,
Oh, sure.
all right, everybody close together so they can do this.
We're all good friends here.
Yeah.
Wait, can we mix this up? I don't see a reason for having all the women on one side. This way? Better?
Awesome. Wait, one more? Yeah, my social media person would kill me if I didn't show up with a picture.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was really great. It was great. I loved it. I like that we did the. Well, I have my. I still love how we did that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I want to give mine out. I didn't get to show up last night.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Test, test.